Jumping in the number 5 spot of the top 5 endgame gaming mechanical keyboards is the BOYI 66 Pro, coming in at a price tag of only $65.50. If you want to check out any of the 5 endgame keyboards in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. But let's talk about the BOYI 66 Pro. This is the only budget pick on the list. And even though this is an endgame list, we had to include this keyboard because it's just so dang good for the price. $65.50 gets you latent PAL magnetic strawberry switches, which are fully magnetic switches, which means analog. Now, these analog switches are unlike traditional switches as they don't have a single set actuation point and a reset point. The most common type of analog switch, Hall effect, uses a magnet inside of the switch to sense and detect the movement of the switch across the entire travel distance by using a magnetic field. The benefits, which we'll continue to explain more in the video, are customizing the actuation point and reset points, things like rapid trigger and analog input, which for things like racing games, you really only would typically use a controller because obviously you can modulate how much throttle or brake you're using. These keyboards can actually modulate in the same way as a controller. How much you press down the W key is how much throttle you're actually going to give your car. That's really, really cool. As well as the ability to have multiple key presses or inputs with a single key press. That's also something that sounds confusing, but we'll get into it. Now, even at this price point, this keyboard has an 8,000 hertz polling rate, and while that might seem overkill, and it probably is, it's the fastest it can be, and so there's no problem with that. We're not paying a premium to have it. Now, one of the best things with magnetic switches is the adjustable actuation point. If you're typing, you can have this at a standard actuation point of like 2 millimeters, but if you're gaming, maybe you want it hyper fast at 0.1 millimeters. This allows you to customize not just how far you press down the switch before it registers, but also how much you release it before it resets. With this keyboard in particular, it has a range of 0.1 millimeters to 4 millimeters, which is pretty much commonplace. That's typically what it is. And one of the other things this keyboard has is rapid trigger. That is super important, and honestly, in this day and age, it's a must for a endgame mechanical keyboard for gaming. This function allows for an instant reset or actuation of your keys based on your intention to press or release it. For example, without rapid trigger engaged, say my actuation point is 0.5 millimeters. If I bottom out the switch and I need to release the switch 3.5 millimeters for it to reset or disengage, with rapid trigger on, as soon as I start releasing the switch at any point past 0.5 millimeters, it will reset. And then when I press it down again, it will actuate again. This significantly increases accuracy of your key presses, especially in games when with movement keys, you're not always going to be fully releasing them and fully depressing them back again. And that's what rapid trigger really just kind of like pioneers. All right, and the next thing this has is DKS, or dynamic keystroke. This allows for during one downstroke and one upstroke, setting different assignments for registered key presses along that downstroke and upstroke. This sounds really confusing, but it actually isn't that confusing. For example, I could press the V key, which in game may be melee, and then have the bottom out of that same V key press activate the G key. So then on the start of the press, I would do a melee in game, and then on the bottom out of that same key press, I would then throw a frag because it activates the G key. Then on the upstroke of that same V key, I could set this to activate the Z key, which would then make me lay down. So with then one downstroke and then one upstroke, I would melee, throw a frag, and then lay down. Now in a lot of games, this doesn't quite work as perfectly as it may sound it works here, but that's all up to the game. The fact that the keyboard can do it is the impressive part. Now with DKS, specifically with this keyboard, unlike some other softwares on the list, you don't have as much customization with the 4 different actuation points. It must bottom out to perform 2 of the assignments, and the actuation and reset points are linked together. All right, now one of the next things, and this is one of my personal favorites, this is mod tap. This gives the ability to tap for one key assignment and then hold down for another. For instance, in Battlefield, I set my left control to be control or crouch in game when held down, but R for reload when tapped. Doing this allows me to reload without taking my hand off the WAS and D keys, but then if I want to crouch, I hold it down, which I hold down anyway because that's the control in game. Now this may sound confusing, but once you start using this in game, it's actually amazing how useful it can really be. Now again, remember, you don't have to use all of these, but most of the keyboards on the list have most of these features. All right, but the last one is toggle key. Toggle key is essentially exactly what it sounds like. When a key is pressed, it acts as a toggle. So setting W and Shift to be toggle keys allows them to both be pressed once in game, and your character will walk and then run until pressed again. This was especially useful in more simulator style games like Hell Let Loose, which I play a lot of, when you do a lot of walking and running. But again, those can be set to any key you want for anything. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. With that, let's move on to more things about the BOYI 66 Pro. Also, we will be doing a back-to-back sound test at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around for that. Now, for connectivity on the 66 Pro, this uses a detachable USB Type-C, so no wireless connectivity here, but at that price point, we don't expect it. Now, as for the build quality for this keyboard, it's fairly light. It does not feel cheaply made though. It's all plastic with a 2-piece plastic shell. You do have dual stage risers on the back, which is nice. Sounds solid, but again, all plastic. Though it does have a metal knob here, which is really nice. The stabilizers here are also tuned quite well with only a slight tick on the enter key. But that's really the only one. The RGB also isn't super vibrant here, but it's perky RGB lighting. You can customize it however you want. But the really impressive part is that not only does this feel good, switches feel great, but it's how good it sounds. I mean, this sounds really quite good. But don't take my word for it, take a listen to the sound test. And that is how it sounds, but with that, let's move on to the number 4 spot. And this is the Akko MOD007HE, coming in at a price tag of $134.99. This is a Hall effect keyboard, so it has those magnetic switches, analog, but it's from Akko, so it kind of has a custom keyboard look to it, and it's very Akko, which is not a bad thing, but it may not be for everyone, which is why it's in the number 4 spot. For switches, you have a choice between Kale Sakura Pink magnetic switches or Akko Cream Yellow switches, which are again magnetic switch variants. The software uses Akko's cloud software. This has a 1000 Hertz polling rate. This has adjustable actuation from 0.1 millimeters to 4 millimeters in increments of 0.1 millimeters, and it works well. Like all of the keyboards on this list are magnetic. Now, for all the features, it's pretty much the same as the last keyboard. You get dynamic keystroke with up to 4 different commands, pure key press, as well as toggle key, mod tab, and rapid trigger. However, in game, some of these things in the software can be a little bit more buggy. Sometimes the mod tab doesn't register the tap function, and I have to press multiple times for it to actually happen. And in the toggle key function, it only registers the key press if you tap fast. So when using it for the W key, it doesn't really work since it won't let me just press and hold the W key when I don't want to lock it. This is kind of stupid, and hopefully it will be worked out in a software update. But if the main thing that you want is like rapid trigger and just adjustable actuation and the ability to have it analog, and you don't care about those, but you care about the sound, the keycaps, things like that, this still might be a good option. But the other 3 keyboards on the list are a little bit better, well, tuned. The software is a little bit better, and that's mainly what you get when you pay more, because let me just tell you, the build quality does not get better. Okay, for connectivity, this thing does give you wireless connectivity with either Bluetooth 5.0, which you're not gonna wanna use during gaming, but you do have a 2.4 gigahertz USB dongle, so if you do wanna wirelessly game with this, well, you still can. Then obviously you can use it wired with a detachable USB Type-C. Now, the big thing that you're getting here is, even though this is a plastic shell, 2-piece here, it's quite heavy. It feels very, very well built. It sounds great. It sounds like I pour on foam or some sort of like poppy sound. It's creamy. I really like the way it sounds. This has a very not wobbly metal knob up here, which is very nice, and I think it looks quite good on the build. But the weird thing is you have to take off a keycap to actually change the connection modes. So I guess it's really mainly to be used as like either wireless or wired. Very strange, but it does have a good like sleep timer. So yeah, that's a little weird, but overall I still really like this keyboard. Now the stabs here are pretty well tuned. They do have some ticks to them, but I do know these are really, really easy stabilizers to tune up. So if you are into kind of modding, this is really a non-issue. It'll take you like 5 minutes to get these tuned perfectly, and they do feel great. I will say these stabilizers feel awesome, especially for gaming. Now the RGB is a step up from the previous keyboard. It's a little bit brighter, has better vibrancy, but obviously these are non-shine through keycaps. You can obviously get shine through keycaps if you want to, but yeah. But with that, let's listen to this beast. Take a listen to the sound test. And that is how it sounds, but with that, let's move on to the number 3 spot. And this is the Corsair K70 MAX. This is a big keyboard coming in at a price tag of $229.99. However, that's too much money for this keyboard, but it is currently priced at $161.76 at the time of filming. So it's not actually that price point, and it makes it much more worth it. But you have to be okay with having a full-size keyboard, which honestly, I think it looks really cool for a full-size. Corsair does do a good full-size keyboard, but again, if you want not a full-size keyboard, well, this doesn't come in like a TKL or anything. So you do have to be ready to have a full size. But for that, you get Corsair's MGX switches. These are again, magnetic switches. And this uses Corsair's IQ software. This does have a bit of a learning curve to it. It's not quite as good as like Razer's or Wooting's software, especially Wooting's software. Now, this keyboard has an 8,000 hertz polling rate. Again, it's overkill, but it's the fastest it can possibly be. This has adjustable actuation from 0.4 millimeters to 0.36 millimeters. And while yes, it's not 0.1, realistically, that doesn't matter too much. But again, if you want 0.1, well, look at the number 2 or number 1 spot or the previous 2 keyboards. Now, this does have a form of dynamic keystroke, but only with 2 commands per key press. In the software, this is called secondary actuation point. Once that's on and you set your actuation values, you can actually set the secondary assignment for the second actuation. For example, the W can be set to only W until 2 millimeters. Then once you go past that, it can be enabled as Shift plus W, which is very cool. And obviously that would enable you to then run in game with a single key press. That's pretty awesome. Now, the other thing this keyboard has specifically is called a tournament switch. Now, they've had this for a while, but well, it's on this and it works great. Basically, this changes the RGB to static only and then disables macros for decreased latency. So to get the fastest possible time, like if you're in a tournament, if you're gaming, pro gaming competitively, well, that's what it does. Wooting also has this in their software, but they don't have a physical switch. And I do think the cool factor of that is like, I'm gonna put this in tournament mode. Yeah, it's kind of gimmicky, but yeah, if you want the absolute fastest keyboard possible, yeah. Now, obviously, this also has rapid trigger, which is like a must. I'm not putting a keyboard on this list unless it has rapid trigger. That's probably the best possible thing that you're gonna want on your keyboard, the most important thing. Now, as far as I could find, this doesn't have any sort of mod tap or toggle key. So that's kind of unfortunate, but overall, because the software is better than the previous 2 keyboards, and after using this and gaming with it, I do think it is a very, very good gaming keyboard. For connectivity, this is wirelessly attachable USB Type-C. Now, for the build quality, this is actually fairly heavy. It does have a plastic bottom to it, which I will say feels a whole lot better than basically every Razer keyboard ever. It still is kind of plasticky for this price point. The front of it has that thick metal plate that they do on most of their keyboards. It is quite thick and it does add a substantial amount of weight. It does have really nice machining on it. And this top part up here, you can see it has kind of like a Corsair camo design. I think it actually looks great. Their volume wheel is also really, really nice and smooth. So they get that done right. There's also these special keys up here that have a nice click to them, which is nice. But then these over here for your multimedia don't have the same click, but still, honestly, I like the setup for a full-size keyboard. I think it's cool. Now, this also comes with a wrist rest, so if you want that, that's cool. I personally actually really like it, especially for a full size. Most of the tabs are well tuned with only slight ticks or rattles. However, the spacebar is pretty atrocious. Yeah, that's not great, but if you have your headset on, it's not too bad. The feeling of these, though, are pretty good. This does feel like a very firm keyboard, which some people actually might really, really like, but it definitely does not have a soft feel like something like the Wooting or even like the Razer keyboards feel fairly soft on bottom out. This one is a stiff feeling, which again, might be a good thing. Definitely a lighter overall switch than some of the others on the list. Now, RGB here is great. It's Corsair. You know they're gonna do that well, and they do. There's pretty much no dim spots. There's tons of brightness. It's perky lighting. It's very, very customizable, and they have tons of modes in IQ. But with that, let's take a listen to how this sounds. Take a listen. And that is how it sounds, but with that, let's move on to the number 2 spot. This is where they start to get really good. And this is the Razer Huntsman V3, coming in at a ridiculously stupid $219.99 price tag. Yes, that is a lot of money, but the implementation of everything is why this is an endgame keyboard. And this truly is an endgame keyboard. Firstly, this is using Razer's analog optical Gen 2 switches. Now, these switches are actually different from all the other switches on the list because this doesn't actually use a magnetic switch like the others on the list that kind of sense where the magnet is with a field. This actually uses a laser. It's optical, and that then determines where the key is in its keystroke. Now for the software, this is using Razer Synapse, which is very easy to use compared to the previous softwares. This is a 1000 hertz polling rate. This has adjustable actuation from 0.1 millimeters to 4 millimeters in increments of 0.1. Standard stuff here. Like the Corsair K70, this has dual actuation, which is again up to 2 different functions per key press based on your actuation settings. This also has rapid trigger, but it adds something called continuous rapid trigger, which basically keeps rapid trigger active until you fully release the key. So if my main actuation is set to 2 millimeters, normal rapid trigger would then be active from the actuation point of 2 millimeters all the way down to the bottom point of 0.4 millimeters. However, if I release to 1 millimeters, the switch would no longer be active. If you switch to continuous rapid trigger on in the same situation, the switch would still be registered until you fully released the key. Now the next special thing this has is what separates it from all the other keyboards on the list, and that is snap tap. This is between 2 keys, most commonly A and D key, and it switches to the last pressed key and back again to the other key when releasing the currently depressed key. That sounds like a jumble of words, but basically it allows you in stuff like CSGO, Overwatch, and mainly Valorant, mainly those 3 games, where your character is able to immediately switch direction. This allows you to do counter strafing like crazy. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. If you haven't, that's insane because it's literally everywhere. This is basically like hacking, but it's not, and it's fully legal even in competitive FPS games, at least at the time of filming. But yeah, it's insane. So basically, if I hold down the A key and while still holding the A key, press the D key, this switches to registering the D. But as soon as I release the D key, A is then registered again. So you can see how instead of having to perfectly switch your keys, you can literally just hold it down and then tap, 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 and you're counter strafing like a freaking god. Now, this also has gamepad remapping, which changes the WAS and D keys to a controller joystick, as well as being able to bind the Q and E keys to the left and right triggers. So in racing games like Forza, instead of having the full acceleration or no acceleration, like you would on any normal keyboard, you can use W to basically slowly press the accelerator, and however much you press the key is, well, however much you're pressing that accelerator. That's awesome. Now, there is no mod tab or toggle key on the Razer Synapse app, so yeah, but again, snap tap, if you play CSGO, if you play Valorant, if you play Overwatch, those games, it's like, honestly, it's a must. I don't think I would play those because you're gonna have other people that have snap tap enabled, and you're just, yeah, it's almost like cheating, but I'm not gonna comment on that. We're just gonna move on. For connectivity, this is wired with an attachable USB Type-C. The build quality here is the only part that I don't like. I do like this kind of stuff. It's got like a cool knob thingy that's on the side and some other buttons that look good, but this thing is super light. I mean, it just doesn't feel, it feels like a $30 keyboard, honestly. Like, it really doesn't feel great. Once it's on the table, feels good, it doesn't sound great, does come with a magnetic wrist rest, but honestly, it's for gaming, and that's it, okay? It doesn't feel great, don't expect it to feel great. RGB looks great, tons of customization, Synapse is great, tons of modes, super easy to customize, but it just doesn't feel or sound great. Don't take my word for it though, take a listen to the sound test. And that is how it sounds. But with that, let's move on to the #1 end game keyboard pretty much of all time. If you want a gaming keyboard, this one is the best if you can afford it by far. You guys already know what it is. This is the Wooting 60HE Plus, coming in at a price tag of $174.99. This is the only one that doesn't have an Amazon link. It is directly from Wooting. That's the only place I think you can get it, but it used to be in pre-order, but at least at the time of filming, you can actually just pick one of these up and now I'm shipped to your house right away. Obviously, these are the keycaps that they make because I thought it looked cool, which it does, but this thing is, it's the best keyboard for gaming that you can buy. That's it. There's a few other switch options that you can get if you don't want to get the pre-built, but in stock form, this comes with the Gateron and Lecker switch. And honestly, for the switches, I was actually really impressed with the feel of them. They have a nice soft bottom out feel, and for gaming, awesome. Great weight as well. Overall, very happy, very impressed. The lubing, while it does feel a little heavy on the lube, it feels super smooth. And honestly, for gaming, I'm really impressed. Now, the software is by far the best on the list. It's the easiest to get to things. It's super simple. You don't have to have a freaking math degree to actually figure out how to use it. And you don't even have to download the software. You can just use this off of your browser, change all of the settings, and it stays without having your browser open. And it works like that. It's really impressive. This obviously has adjustable actuation from 0.1 millimeters to 4 millimeters in increments of 0.1 millimeters. This has rapid trigger and continuous rapid trigger. This also has a setting called Rappy Snappy. It takes the 2 selected keys of your choosing and it actuates the one pressed down the furthest. So let's say I get 2 keys, which are A and D. If I press down the A key 1.5 millimeters and then the D key down to 1.3 millimeters, the A key is still the one that's going to be registered, even though I press the D key last. Once I press the D key past 1.5 millimeters, then it's registered. And if I then press the A key back down past that, well, it then registers that one again. This can be very helpful in some games, but most of the time I actually prefer just using rapid trigger. Now, like Razer SnapTap, Wooting also, created their version of it, which is also backwards compatible with all of the Wooting keyboards. Now, they called this originally SOCD, which I believe they just called Snappy Tappy, but this again is the exact same thing, except one difference that actually makes it better than Razer's. Between 2Ks, A and D switches to the last press key. So again, you can do counter strafing like crazy, but with Razer's, it turns off rapid trigger during that counter strafing. And with SOCD or Snappy Tappy, it actually retains rapid trigger, which makes it even better, even faster, and well, end game for sure. This also has dynamic keystroke. So again, you can set different downstrokes and upstrokes. So 4 different keys possible. This can be very helpful in some games, but the fact that you can customize it to this level is just awesome. This also has the toggle key function and the mod tap function. So again, you can remap everything. Basically, the Wooting has everything that all the other keyboards on this list have, but does it easier and better, and the software is so much better. It also works 100% of the time. Some of the other ones, like we said, had some issues, had some glitches. We've never had the Wooting glitch even once, so they really have got a lock on their software. For connectivity, this uses a detachable USB Type-C right there on the left side. Now, the build quality here, I was actually expecting this to be metal, and it's not. It's plastic, but it's well built. You can also get a lot of different cases if you want to customize these. Has kind of some lines on the back. I do like the yellow accents, but it's all plastic. However, it does still sound pretty dang good. I like it. I also got these special keycaps, which look really cool. I will say the spacebar does need some work. It was a little bit bent, like PBT keys can, it's a common problem, but that could definitely be refined a little bit for the amount that you pay for this keycap set. Definitely that should be perfect, but it's hard to get a keycap set that looks this good and kind of integrates with everything. Yeah, I do like it still. The RGB here is the best on the list. It is so freaking bright, and the spacebar itself I think has 5 LEDs in it, so that's impressive. But with that, take a listen to the Wooting 60HE Plus. And that is how it sounds. Again, if you want to check out any of the 5 keyboards in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. And for Wooting, we have their Wooting link below. This is cheaper than the Razer's, and it's better than the Razer's. That is really impressive. Yeah. Cool. All right, guys, one note before we leave. If you want to check out a ENDGAME mice, well, that video will be right here. But one little note with the SnapTap and SOCD or Snappy Tappy, literally as I'm filming this, I think Valve came out and is possibly banning the Razer's version. I don't know if they've banned the Wooting variant of this. I'm not sure. So definitely research that before, if the reason that you're buying these is to have that SnapTap or Rappy Tappy or SOCD or whatever they want to call it. But yeah, for sure, still ENDGAME. And I don't know if they've ever done an update on the Wooting software that doesn't allow for backwards compatibility. So you could genuinely probably get your Wooting keyboard and keep it for a very long time. Whereas with Razer and stuff, it's just not the same track record. So that's really impressive. But guys, with that, this is Consumer Tech Review. I'll see you guys in the next video.